Hello and thanks for joining us. Coming up, a dystopian future, a disquieting present and an unlikely partnership from the past. We bring you the latest in cinema this week.
I had your job once. I was good at it.
My friend. I haven't been as happy as this for years.
Film critic Lisa Nesselson is with me in the studio. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Olivia.
Well, we're starting with a film that looks forward some 30 years, Blade Runner 2049. This was directed by Denis Villeneuve. It comes 35 years after Ridley Scott first brought Philip K. Dick's science fiction novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep to the big screen in the first Blade Runner. Was it worth the wait?
Well, it's set in California in 2049 when nobody has guns. Oh, that really would be science fiction, wouldn't it? It's America. Of course everybody has guns. As for whether it was worth the wait, that's a legitimate but kind of tough question. In 1982, the film was not an immediate commercial success, but it became obvious that you had to have seen it to be part of the pop culture conversation.
It was cultish.
Absolutely. And Blade Runner, that entered the vocabulary. It's a sci-fi masterpiece, in my humble opinion, and the visual style then and pretty much now was jaw-dropping. And there was no question what it was about. It was about whether machines should do our bidding, essentially as slaves, and what happens when robots develop feelings and even survival instincts. The original Blade Runner made you think. So the sequel is a beautiful but exhausting to watch object that makes me think I'm glad I saw it, but I'm a little more reluctant to tell absolutely everyone you must rush out and see it right now if you're not already interested. Harrison Ford starred in the original as a guy who hunts down replicants and retires them. That's a euphemism for being a bounty hunter who kills robots. That's a Blade Runner. Sounds cool. Is cool. Harrison Ford is in this one, too. And, we're kind of lucky to have him. First for the new Star Wars and now this. But this time, the central Blade Runner, whose name is Kay and works for the LAPD of the future, is played by Ryan Gosling. He tracks down an early generation replicant who's been hiding out for roughly 30 years. Kay finds a date carved into the base of a tree, suddenly is afflicted with childhood memories that may or may not have been implanted there. And then he either gets better or worse at his job, depending on how you feel about whether the philosophy live and let live should actually be applied to renegade artificial intelligence. Let's take a look at a day in Kay's rather dimly lit existence.
What sort do you have in mind? Because I got all kinds. No.
I'm not buying.
No. This is just my game, and I play it fair. No. I mean, bigger than you. Bigger than you were trying to shut me down. Bigger than you, and they were men at that.
Like you say, quite moody and very well lit. So perhaps it's stronger on the visual side than the emotional side?
Well, you could call this Replicant Lives Matter. There is a strongish emotional current at work, but I'm not sure it'll make much sense to a viewer who's unfamiliar with the original. Of course, if you walk down a corridor in the Paris metro today, you're in an environment that Blade Runner really anticipated of screens, and more screens, she says from a screen. If you like staring at Ryan Gosling, which probably describes tens of millions of people, this may not seem overly long. The musical score is excellent, but it's designed to make you anxious, and so it's kind of punishing to endure for 2 hours and 43 minutes.
So indeed a little bit dystopian. Well, okay, after looking into the future, we'll come back to the present now with Austrian director Michael Haneke, his latest film, Happy End. Now, Haneke is one of the small club of directors that's won the Golden Palm at the Cannes Film Festival twice, and he presented this film there this year. We did wonder if he'd get a third Golden Palm. It didn't happen in the end, but what did you make of the film?
Well, I can't speak for the jury, but I really enjoyed this layered and sardonic tale about a well-to-do family in Calais. Now, when people hear Calais, they think desperate immigrants. And we do get to see some immigrants, but in a very incongruous setting. But as is often the case in Haneke's work, what we really get to see are puzzle pieces slowly falling into place. Jean-Louis Trintignant, who has appeared in some 120 films, has given up film acting except for Haneke. He co-starred with the late Emmanuel Riva a few years ago in Haneke's incredibly fine Amour. He's irreplaceably good in this one as an 84-year-old patriarch who really doesn't want to go on living but keeps botching various ways he tries to find to put an end to his life. Isabelle Huppert plays his daughter, who, with her less than competent son, runs the family construction business. Now, most of the characters use smartphones and computers, and the manner in which these devices permeate their lives is something Haneke handles brilliantly. Happy End is a fragmented ensemble piece, something the director has excelled at since the start of his career. He writes scripts in German and then has them translated into French. Let's take a look.
Tu es déjà venu ici?
Ici, à Calais?
Oui.
On est venu ici ensemble quand j'étais encore à Arles.
Étrange
Qu'est-ce qui est étrange?
qu'elle soit là, présent.
Papa.
Tu vas rester ici?
Papa. Sa mère est à l'hôpital, je te l'ai déjà dit 2 fois. Elle a une grave intoxication. Elle va rester ici jusqu'à temps qu'elle se remette.
Excuse-moi, je suis gâteux, je sais. Donc tu ne vas pas rester ici?
So I think we can always say that Haneke's films are cerebral, but sometimes he's accused of being a bit cold and aloof. Do you think that's fair criticism?
Ooh, yes and no, because he can also be very, very funny, but in a dark, dark, dark way. He himself says he makes films about human behavior and contemporary society, and that it would be almost impossible for him to get the financing to make these kinds of films now if he hadn't already built his reputation, which he's been doing since 1974. Haneke's refusal to spell out things and people, while giving us lots and lots of clues, is what renders his work so intriguing if you like it and so frustrating if you don't. One of the things France is incredibly good at is at turning around book manuscripts in record time. So this is an updated edition of a book from 5 years ago, Haneke by Haneke, including Happy End, and it just came out roughly 4 months after Happy End was shown in Cannes. It's the result of dozens of hours of conversations with 2 critics from the French film magazine Positive, and at 350 pages, it's a very long, fascinating conversation with a very smart man. He comes right out and says he loses interest in a film if he knows what the director thinks about the characters. In Happy End, we find a young girl who gives her mother's medication to a hamster to see how the animal reacts, a number of people having sort of lurid conversations via computer, several suicide attempts, an industrial accident, and it's an aftermath, and a hairdresser put in an awkward situation, and more. Some people think that Haneke is sort of parodying himself in this one, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's true that he's very appreciated here in France. He got one of his Palme d'Or, Golden Palms, from Isabelle Huppert as president of the jury. That's true. Now, after we've looked into the future and the present, let's go to the past now. Stephen Frears' latest film is based on the true story of the unlikely friendship between the elderly Queen Victoria, no less, and a Muslim man who came imported by way of India. Should we be rushing to see Victoria and Abdul?
Yes, yes, with an exclamation point. This was the opening film at the just completed British Film Festival in Dinard, and I must say we were much amused and touched. That said, I would not want to be a monarch, but I do like the idea of lending one's name to an entire era. So imagine the foresight to be named Victoria, and hence the Victorian era, and all those Victorians running around. Very convenient.
There's a lot of it about.
This true story apparently only resurfaced in 2010 when some notebooks were tracked down by an enterprising author who reads Urdu. And it's an interesting story, believe me. Stephen Frears, who directed Helen Mirren as Queen Elizabeth in The Queen, and Judi Dench in Philomena and Mrs. Brown, directs Dame Judy again as Queen Victoria. And this is really as good as acting gets. I mean, Dench is just mind-blowingly good. She is the Queen. The supporting cast is also marvelous, as is Ali Fazal, who plays Abdul.
And for the story itself, I have heard some criticism from the UK specifically, saying that it's almost a kind of positive revisionist view of colonialism.
Well, the the people in my nation were once colonial subjects, but I haven't had that experience. So I disagree. I don't think anyone will walk out of the theater saying, you know, it was much better when an elderly, overweight woman who couldn't set foot there was Empress of all India. The film presents the British monarchy as dangerously hidebound and oblivious. We get lots of fab decor and costumes and sweeping camera moves, lots of pinched faces forced, and I do mean forced, to endure as protocol is thrown to the winds, etc. Victoria says to Abdul, once they've grown close, that nobody knows what the job of queen is like, and it's not like
true.
She can get on Skype and commiserate with, you know, other queens. Many of my French colleagues find the film disturbing because they think it lacks political bite. They think Abdul is too nice and too obsequious. The contrast between endless pageantry and the boredom it brings on, I think, is sharp and poignant, and I think this very entertaining tale does have plenty of bite. It's just that the bite is cleverly incorporated into an old-fashioned Hollywood-style, very British movie. It's not every day that a chubby monarch in her 70s learns to speak and write Urdu from a visiting servant. She's got just about unlimited power over the court and her subjects, which is a quarter or a third of humanity at that time, and she's not afraid of Muslims. I think that's a message worth conveying.
Indeed, it's a very interesting message. And it's interesting to see that, for example, France, without a monarchy, could perhaps see this differently to the UK, which does have a monarchy at the moment. Thank you very much for joining us this week, Lisa. We'll leave you with a very authentically grumpy Judi Dench as Queen Victoria in Victoria and Abdul. Do remember to check out our website for more arts and culture. There's more news coming up on France 24 in just a moment.
मैं रानी
Rani.
He's teaching her Hindu.
Is that allowed?
I think you will find it is Urdu, the Muslim version.
Oh my goodness me.